All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of FCA's Talk at 5 o'clock. And today we talk about everything health tech and AI. And I have a very special guest today with me. And Hassan, I don't even know from where to start. Should I start that you're an author, an Iron Man, a surgeon, a father? I mean, I don't know. You have so many credentials. That's impressive. And it's my honor to have you here. So I'll let you start from wherever you feel suits best.
Well, thank you, Eva. I think the best way to start is as I always like to say, I'm just a kid from a small little town, New York, a little village town, New York called Brooklyn. I'm a father, a husband, and a surgeon, sort of in that order. And that's pretty much it. Just got to do a lot of really interesting things in life.
That's amazing. So, if someone never heard about a little town called Brooklyn, tell me where it all started and how did
It
it
all
all started?
started in that little town in Brooklyn. I like to start with that because Brooklyn was very formative for me. I'm the son of West African immigrant parents. They came to America seeking lots of opportunity. Like many immigrant parents, they wanted their son to be a doctor or a lawyer. I chose to be a doctor, even though I really wanted to be an artist. And my dad wouldn't sort of sign off on that because he thought it was not going to earn me a lot of money and make me a good living. So I'm sort of an inner artist that has not had his chance to blossom. So as a result, Eva, I went into surgery because it's given me an outlet for creativity. I'm a heart and lung transplant surgeon. That's my specialty and discipline. I spent 25 years in the Navy, retired recently, written a lot of books over the course of the years, infusing a lot of art and creativity into those works, starting with the art of human care, and most recently, smarter healthcare with AI. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about how I came to be in this AI space.
Amazing. Tell us a little bit more about how do you combine the surgical field with creativity? Assume you're not putting the wrong pieces in the wrong place to see how it works.
Good question. That's an excellent question. I've always defined creativity as this way of connecting dots, making a connection. If you think about the great artists of the world, whether you're talking about the contemporaries, the classical, the folks from the Renaissance, art was always making a connection, whether you're making connection with marble or paint and the canvas, with drums, with music. You're always making connection. When you're singing, that powerful, sweet voice hits you and it's connecting with that individual. So art to me is always about connection. And the creativity from surgery is that's what we do. Surgery is a very tactile profession. So I knew immediately when I first had an opportunity to see surgery. In fact, I was in the operating room this morning. That's why I'm still in my attire here. I said, this is exactly what I want to do because I saw this incredible orchestration of cognitive ability, finesse and dexterity, and of course, the elegance of cardiac surgery, which is what I chose to go into. And I said, that's just so cool. That, in essence, is creativity. Thinking about the case from this morning, it was a mitral valve repair. And there's a lot of creativity there because everyone is unique. And to fix the prolapse and the areas where the valve was deficient and not working functionally, you had to sort of have this geographical, three-dimensional concept of like what it should look like. And yeah, we have images and we have all those things, but the heart is not full, it's not beating, and you have to sort of reconstruct what it would be like in its sort of physiologic state. And you get a chance to sort of do that. And every case is like that. Every case is unique. And in transplant in particular, it's just awesome to know that every case that you do is not only going to make a connection between someone who's passed away, unfortunately, and that death, but on the other side, there's going to be life. And that new life and that new organ is going to thrive and hopefully go on to give this person that's new lease on life an opportunity to go on and fulfill great things, sort of as a legacy extension of the person that passed away. So all of that to say that it's all connections. And I think creativity is all about connection. Surgery is a very, very mechanical, very tactile, very physical kind of connection, art and practice. And it's really amazing and very rewarding.
It's incredible how the inspiration can come from the very unexpected ways. So you really never really gave up your creative side. You just transform it through transforming people's lives and giving it another chance for another patient.
I
That's
like to think
incredible.
so. Yes, absolutely.
So I know that you started back in Brooklyn and had inspirations for huge artists. We might have missed another Picasso, but it's still not too late. And you're giving a second chance to lives, which is very honorable. Tell us a little more about how you pivoted into the early introductions of AI technology in healthcare. It's a very
Yeah,
sensitive subject to many people. A lot of people are conservative about how the data is management and what actually AI can do in a healthcare field for us today.
indeed. Absolutely. The way I'd like to probably approach that is with another very quick story. I am and have been and always was as a child an insanely curious person. I used to ask questions about everything. I just have this voracious appetite for wanting to know the answers to all kinds of questions that pop into my head. And so from the very beginning, I had this very intense curiosity about things, especially about the natural world, the physical world, and of course, computers and anything that had to do with the future. I was really fascinated about like, how is life going to be in the future? And I had an early Commodore 64, so I had this programming sort of ritual that I would have. I'd spend weekends programming my 64 so I could play games, just for a little while after this hours and hours of programming. And so I was innately interested in that. So park that there, right? And just kind of thinking about that as a child. Fast forward, I had this amazing opportunity to join the military, and I chose to join the Navy. It was a long story behind that. But nonetheless, I said I was just going to do a few years and get out. Well, 25 years later, I was still in this organization called the United States Navy. And it really is important to mention that background because that is really sort of the answer in many ways to your question about how did it come to be that this kid from Brooklyn, heart surgeon, would be not only involved in AI, but have the opportunity, the awesome privilege, and the great honor to lead initiatives within the Department of Defense at a very high level in the delivery, implementation, scaling, and development of AI at a time when it wasn't at its zeitgeist. AI has been around for 50 plus years, right? We all know that, the Dartmouth meeting, it was coined many, many years ago. And it's just now come to sort of the public's attention because of the fact that for the first time, most lay people, those that are not computer scientists, those that are not geeked out on the future and haven't been programming Commodore 64s or any kind of computer for that matter, have now had a chance to interact and engage with it through large language models. And about a decade ago, again, because of my very curious nature and my desire to want to know things, I learned about a new subspecialty in healthcare called clinical informatics. And for those of you that probably never heard about clinical informatics, it is a specialty, a subspecialty in particular that didn't even exist when I graduated medical school. So that is why I tell students all the time, always remain curious, always remain interested in what's happening around you. So this new subspecialty was developing because people realized that we were implementing and bringing into our medical workflow this computer system, and more importantly, the electronic health record, which before the introduction of the electronic health record, you know what we used to do? Believe it or not, we used to take a pen and write notes in the patient's chart. And if we wanted an order written, we would write an order and someone would read it. And that's how instructions and sort of care plans and things were delivered to patients. So with the introduction of the electronic health record, it introduced this new technology and sort of a paradigm shift, Eva, of like how we were going to be delivering healthcare. And this clinical informatics workforce was being developed through a certification, through extra training. And I got on the bandwagon right away because when I realized that clinical informatics at its core had four components: clinical, leadership, data and technology, and administration, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I do in cardiac surgery. You have to have a lot of clinical background. You have to use technology and data to make better decisions and also to do really cool things in the heart. You have to be a leader And there's a lot of administration involved, just the orchestration of the hospital navigating that space, but then in the operating room as well. You have an anesthesiologist, you have a perfusionist behind you, you have techs, you have all these people that are all working, circulating to sort of like conduct the orchestration of this great surgery. And I was like, there's a board certification in that? Sign me up. I want to do that all day long. Not to mention, as a profession, the cardiac surgeons were the pioneers in taking data and translating that into better outcomes for our patients. That was primarily done through an initiative called the Society of Thoracic Surgeons database, clinical database, the STS database. We were voluntarily giving information to our society so that they could correlate that, they could analyze it, they could evaluate it, and they could actually rank centers and surgeons ultimately against each other. Not in a bad way, but to learn what the best practices were. So we started to learn that, hey, if you give too much blood after surgery, you have bad outcomes. If you give antibiotics before surgery, you have less infections. And then after a while, we started to have this sort of consensus about what worked and didn't work. And what we were doing, Eva, we were taking data and making better and informed decisions. So with that background, my curiosity, I now have this incredible opportunity that can only have happened because I happened to be at the right place at the right time in the Navy. And while we were developing, implementing, and purchasing and acquiring a brand new electronic health record, I had the awesome opportunity to serve as the Chief Medical Informatics Officer for the Navy.
Incredible.
The entire Navy. It was an incredible experience. I had a huge team, lots and lots of people that were dedicated to being successful with taking this new technology and integrating it into our health spaces in a way that we're going to improve outcomes and care for our patients. We have family members, the servicemen and women that we were taking care of. And along the way, I got to go to the War College. And it was at the War College, as the only doctor in my class of the graduating class of 2018, that I was surrounded by all of these incredible leaders, amazing people, not only throughout government, but throughout all of the service branches of the military, and had these great conversations with people from the intelligence community. And so think about my background, Eva, right? I have clinical informatics. I'm very curious. And these folks are talking about how they take information and make good decisions and get insights, and how they could take video and analyze it. And they're using tools that we, euphemistically call artificial intelligence. And I'm like, yeah, artificial intelligence, that's been around for a while. But when I actually saw it in practice and I had these conversations, and I had access to some of the professors that came from these communities and really had deep conversations with them, I immediately saw that one of the greatest potentially missed opportunities, at least back then, was to use AI in military medicine and healthcare writ large to make better decisions. And in my mind, it just seemed like a natural progression of what I was already on a path of. And I had an opportunity to spend several years doing research. And that culminated into a thesis paper that I wrote called AI and Military Medicine, the Strategic Application of Our Era. And it was a War College paper. And like many War College papers, that gets archived. And people in the Pentagon and military leaders go back and look at our archived papers that, really smart people get a chance to spend time thinking and researching and writing about, like I did. And someone read my paper and they were like, hey, we just started this new organization called the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. That was in 2018. And a year later, Eva, I was recruited. I was pulled away from being the Chief Medical Informatics Officer, and I was placed in a position to start and to lead our health portfolio within that organization. I was the Warfighter Health Mission Chief for the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. And just think about the timing. I got there in the fall of 2019. And I know for many people listening in your audience, they're probably like, 2019, when was that? Because anything before the pandemic is a blur. It's like, what happened before the pandemic? This global pandemic truly impacted and upended our lives. And if you think about it, it changed our lives in such a way that nothing that we did before the pandemic is really quite the same after the pandemic.
That's true.
in so many ways, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. But many things change. And for us, while we were at the Jake, we were witness to the evolution and the rapid acceleration of the maturity of AI. And I say the maturity of AI because, you're like, well, maturity, how do you put that in context? Well, you think about it. If AI was coined and defined back in the 50s, through all of these decades, there were sort of fits and starts, right? All of these different things. You call the AI winter, you'll say like, oh, everyone's exuberant about it, and that didn't really kind of deliver on its promise. But if you think about that time, especially when we were sort of starting in this new organization with this opportunity, this rich opportunity ahead of us, in my mind, I think that we had a collection of super forces that are still present today that were not quite there before. Let me give you those super forces,
Okay.
especially in the context of healthcare. We have data. And I just spent all these years going through this evolution of taking this paper and pen documentation that nobody could read. It was like hieroglyphics, nobody could understand or decipher. And now we're typing everything in. So all of that medical information had become digitized, not to mention all the body of literature in healthcare from all the research and the papers that we had. So we have data. That's huge. The other thing we had is connectivity. Data and connectivity kind of coming together. I could reach across the world and Australia or France or Spain and collaborate with my colleagues. And I could send PDF documents of thousands of pages to them instantly. So that's an incredible paradigm shift than what we had before. You had to fax it or send it by, mail and wait weeks and weeks. And you just can't, collaborate that way, not as effectively and efficiently. So data and connectivity. The other thing is we have this massive amount of investment. Even at the Pentagon, we were given a lot of resources to do our work. So that was incredible. And all of the private sector investments, all the investments that are happening right now, that's another really powerful force. The data connectivity investments. Then you have health policy, which has sort of been shaped and changed over the time, especially during the pandemic. For the first time, you could actually get reimbursed for seeing a patient like I'm seeing you on the screen. That never existed before. So there was never really an incentive to really mature that paradigm of like telemedicine. So that health policy kind of changing the landscape of the rules and the incentives for how things were going to be conducted was really important. And then we had computing power. Like our computing power is incredible. Where's my, this is like thousands of Commodore 64s right here in my hand, right? Can you think about like, I just can't even imagine. Like if I thought to myself, back in my early childhood of like programming my Commodore 64, and someone told me I'm going to be able to hold in my hand a device that I could take pictures in, I could email, I could play games, I could see video, I could watch movies, and I could record video. I would have thought they were crazy. I would like, you guys are insane. I saw that on Star Trek. I don't believe it exists. So that came about. And then the final super force, the most important super force, is everyone listening right here, everyone watching, is people. And people are driving a lot of the change, right? So you take those 5 super force factors: people, investments, data and connectivity, the policy, and the fact that we have this massive computing power. And right there, that's like a cocktail for something explosive to happen. And that's exactly what happened. And that is what is happening. Anyone that has been introduced to ChatGPT, a large language model, to use them as sort of as an example of many, will immediately say, hey, I used that model back in, when it first came out, 2022. It was okay. You use it now, you'd be like, oh my gosh, completely blown away. If you had an opportunity to use it then and never touched it again until you came to 2025 and used it, you would think you were interacting with a completely different technology. And I would end with this, and this is for your audience, to say that my curiosity is still the same. The super forces that I just talked about are only getting even more powerful, each one of them. And the final thing is, the AI in my mind that you use right now is the worst AI you'll ever use, right? That's been a term that's been like thrown around all the time. It's the worst AI you'll ever use. You'll go back like a year from now and be like, I can't believe that. That was terrible back then. It's so much better now. And just think about how much faster things are going to evolve. And then I think about, of course, going back to patient care and healthcare, sort of my specialty. And I think about all the possibilities and all of the challenges that we have in healthcare that can be remedied, that can be impacted in a positive and an effective way using this tool and leveraging it the appropriate way to deliver better care to people. And I do believe that's possible, because one of the great privileges that my team and I had was to build things from scratch, like from an idea, identifying a problem, being exposed to a number of solutions, and then working to navigate through the very intricate, difficult, bureaucratic space of the military and military medicine, and then deliver that solution to a group of individuals that never used the technology before, incorporate it into their workflow, and then have them use it in such a way that their behaviors have changed, their practices change, and ultimately outcomes to get better. And that is really the experience that really encapsulates how I got to be where I'm at this point. And I capture it all in my book, Smarter Healthcare with AI, because I just recognize that over the course of the years, and particularly since I've left the military, that the experiences that I had in that time were so historic, they were so unusual and uncommon, that I wanted to emotionally capture that moment. And I did it in I think a way that's, accessible to people, because I talked about the stories. I talked about how we took an idea during COVID, for example, of not being able to do anything and being sent home out of the building, and being at home with our computers and wondering to ourselves, how can we help? We have this incredible cadre of talent. We have AI engineers, we have access to data, we have computer scientists, we have data scientists, we have war fighters, we have administrators, we have great leaders, and we have this huge problem that's going on. It's impacting our lives. And it's, people were dying, and so what we did was we think about it. I think about it all the time. It gives me chills. We're all at home, hunkered down, like 20 calls, and just trying to make things happen. And got to the point where we said, hey, what if we were able to reverse engineer some data from CMS? And in this case, it was claims data. This is just one example of many I highlight in the book. And this is spring of 2020. This is like, just think about that. This is like, we just got sent home. March 13th, 2020 was the last day for us at the Pentagon. All right, go. Everyone has to go home. Many people, like myself and others, although I had a little bit more reservations, people were like, oh, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. So I was like, no, it's just not going to be a lot longer than a couple of weeks. But while we were all like hunkered down thinking about things, we were like, what if we reverse engineered some of the data from claims data from CMS? Now think about that. That sounds great in concept, but how do you get claims data from CMS? Well, we have to contact legal. Everyone's at home, so we got to find who the right legal person is, and then we have to come up with data sharing agreements between the DoD and HHS, and then we have to get like more real-time data because they're giving us data that's too far behind, and then we have to sort of build models, and then we have to build a platform, and then we have to have a graphic user interface that makes sense to people, because we're not all data scientists. We're not going to understand that raw data. We have to make sense of this. We have to translate it. And oh, by the way, we have to validate it and we have to test it. And we realized that claims data wasn't enough. We also had to get data from like Amazon shipments. And think about what we did. So we took all of this information and we were starting to see patterns. And we got to a point where we had a dashboard where, down to the zip code level, we could predict where COVID cases were going to erupt. And we would overlay hospitalizations to that as one of our validation measures. And that dashboard proved very effective. So in the late spring, early summer, we had a tool that our National Guard folks could use, some of our leadership could use, to say, hey, we should send some resources to this place as opposed to that place, because they're going to actually experience a surge in cases. Let's send masks there. Let's send nurses there. Let's send doctors there. Let's send resources there. Maybe we can hold off on this place right now because they haven't experienced it yet. And that's where I saw the power of how this technology can really impact how we deliver not only individual care, but at a population level, do something very substantial. And quite frankly, very unique.
Few things that you highlighted beautifully. I think the key takeaway that AI is not something that happened just a couple of years ago. It's
No, not at
been
all.
around for decades, and it's been behind the scene transforming the way how we receive care, the quality of information, the connecting the doctors and networks within global associations, and transforming how we manage data and solving day-to-day problems. With AI now, we have a huge potential to solve our biggest problems like curing cancer. And there's multiple dimensions of AI. It's still a technology. It needs to be applied in the right way, in the right tools. There is generative AI, there's conversational AI, in a complex compute. It's still artificial intelligence with its own different shapes and form. And how we employ it, how we deploy it, how we use it for the greater goods of the society, that's up to us to decide. And it doesn't make decisions for us, obviously. And I love to the fact, I want you to dive deeper a little bit more about your book. Because again, thank you very much for not leaving your brilliant thoughts only to the very few in Pentagon to digest and get excited about it. And we'll link to the book below the video for everybody to digest, because I think the book itself has been a big bestseller on Amazon, as far as I know, last time I checked. And it's incredible because it combines the unique information about the journey of the military surgeon and adoption of the AI and how it transformed over the years, how we evolve as a human beings with interactions with technology, and people are the centerpiece of all that together. So tell us a little bit more about the book, but don't give all the secrets.
All right. Okay. I will leave some nuggets for curiosity and for folks to be interested in reading it on their own. But thank you for that kind introduction into the book. The concept behind writing a book, I think every author is always asked the central question: why did you write this book? Why did you write that paper? Why did you publish this work? And we all feel like it's our baby, right? It's our thing. We worked so long on it, and I've had the opportunity and great fortune to write a couple of books now, but this one was a really important book. And in fact, I put aside another project because I thought the time was right to write this book. And what I mean by that is I had just left the military. And I was just talking to a student that I was mentoring, and he had asked a question of like, do you get to publish papers in the military? And I'm like, well, not exactly, because some of the data we work with, of course, is very sensitive. And so it's not out there. So there were lots of projects that I worked on that would have been great if I was in an academic setting to publish and kind of share. But I had that opportunity to do that. So once I got out of the military, now no longer sort of in that environment and under those sort of some of those regulations, I was able to sort of be a bit more reflective, one, and two, be expressive about what it was that we did. And fortunately for me, a lot of my team members were also out of the military as well. So they were able to speak a lot more freely about what we did. But we didn't share anything super sensitive. But it's just, you're just able to be a bit more candid about your experiences and exposures. This book is really about telling stories. I like to read, and I've always found some of the most effective and the stickiest concepts that I remember come from a story. I think we're just wired that way. In fact, we've had many studies that show, right, as soon as a human being hears a story, different parts of our brain start to get activated. We're just innately designed to listen to stories. And in the book, I really share stories. I made it technically simple and story rich, if that makes sense, because I wanted it to be accessible, because AI is a very technical subject. And yes, I could have talked about coding and different languages and Python and all this stuff, but I would immediately lose people. And yes, we had to use and leverage all of those tools. But I think what's more important is the why of why we were doing what we were doing, and the how, and what happened as a result. And we started from a central place of, let's identify problems unique to the military medical space and marry those solutions that we were being exposed to those problems. And in some cases, the solutions came before the problems, but often it was identifying the problem. That's really important, because a lot of people in this technology sort of space sometimes come up with a great thing, but there's no real problem for it. They may go looking for a problem. It's very unique, and it's almost like, a unicorn when you develop something like an iPhone that nobody thought they needed, but now everyone needs. So, those are far and few between. But nonetheless, that's kind of what our sort of approach was. And then more importantly, the reason why I wanted to capture it in the book was because the information was still fresh in my mind. And I had the time to reflect during my immediate period after retiring. And like I said, I had access to my team members and I interviewed them. And I was also learning about an emerging group of technologists that were really, in my mind, making a huge impact in healthcare with their respective companies. And I brought those in. And then the final piece of this sort of puzzle for the book, and why I thought it was so important to share the story right now at this time, is because let me tell you the full title. Full title is Smarter Healthcare with AI, which I think inherently gives you a little bit of an idea what this is about. Smarter Healthcare with AI. I believe we can be smarter in healthcare using AI. So let's start with that premise. And the subtitle is Harnessing Military Medicine to Revolutionize Healthcare for Everyone, Everywhere. Harnessing military medicine to revolutionize healthcare for everyone, everywhere. I felt that was an important subtitle because the subtext of the entire book is starting with this premise. Military medicine has advanced the field of healthcare in ways that are usually completely unnoticed to the general public, and in fact, people in healthcare. But when you're in military medicine, and if you're curious like I am, going back to my curiosity, and a student of history, you always want to know, like, how did we get to do this? And how did this come about? And why do we do things that way? That's always my question to myself. I'm always asking questions, and I read voraciously, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the military has been the reason why many of the advances that we enjoy right now, even as patients that experience better care, it's come from the military. One of my mentors, in fact, one of the admirals that endorsed the book, I'm proud to say, used to always say, nothing good comes from war except the advancement of healthcare. So thinking about that, you're like, whoa, how do you come to that conclusion? Well, war is not, not a pleasant thing. And we have to take care of patients. But through that process, we've actually learned how to take really good care of people. We learned, for example, as I've mentioned in the book, and I told my colleagues that just completely felt like they were, listening to something that was, hearsay. Like, what? How could that be? And I would tell my colleagues in War College, think about it, I'm the only doc, and in War College, I would tell them, more people died from illness, infection, disease, and bullets and bombs in all of our campaigns. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? They would scratch their heads and just, how could that be? And I'm like, yes. And I would start telling them things like, you ever heard of smallpox? It was because of smallpox, we probably won the Revolutionary War, because Washington's Continental Army had a process of exposing the Continental Army people to smallpox through a process called variolation, which is not, it was kind of like a precursor to vaccines, but they would get inoculated with a little bit of smallpox and they'd develop immunity to that. Many of the British people weren't doing that. And so as a result, lots of those people were succumbing to smallpox and the Continental Army was spared. That was like the beginning and the genesis of mass vaccinations, right? And I know there's a big vaccination controversy right now, so I won't even go there, but just think about that. That's a military thing. In the Civil War, there's the first documented case of someone receiving a blood transfusion. Now, think about that. You go into the hospital now, and the patient today required a blood transfusion. And no one thinks, like, how did we get to a point where you have a bag of blood and you can give it to somebody that needs it? Well, that was a result of the Army pioneering a blood bank process, learning how to preserve it. I mean, this took decades to evolve into the mature system that we have right now, where you can actually store blood. Now you fast forward to some of our military campaigns of the last 20 years, and we learned that you give whole blood is a more effective way of taking care of patients that are traumatically injured. All the military. And oh, by the way, another really cool thing from the military, antisepsis. There was a British surgeon, his name was Lister, who would tell all of his colleagues, you guys should stop going into the operating room without washing your hands. And they thought he was crazy. Even they used to go to the morgue and dissect a patients to say, why did this patient die? Never washed their hands, rolled up their sleeves, and then went and started taking care of patients. So think about how they were and he knew that something bad was being transferred to all of these places. Thus came the beginning of antisepsis. And that ushered in a whole new paradigm of how we could do surgery more effectively, safer, and get better outcomes. And of course, you had anesthesia, you marry anesthesia with antisepsis and blood transfusions. Now, all of a sudden in surgery, you've opened up the aperture to what's possible in a way that never could have been imaginable before. All in my mind, a result of the military. So, kind of coming back to the book, my mind right now, I'm like, here is that intersection again, that very dynamic place where the military, through our work at the Jake, through what's being done right now, we are now leading and pushing the next side of frontier of advancement that is going to permeate all of the places of civilian healthcare. And the military is kind of leading the way. And I wanted to share that story because I thought this was an important time to do that. We were at this inflection point where you had these 5 super forces. The stories are fresh in my mind. Everyone's excited about it. And I had no idea that ChatGPT was going to drop on this and like blow the whole thing up. But here we are, and everyone's excited about it. I can't pick up a paper nowadays and not, read 1 or 2 pages without someone mentioning AI in some context in some way. And I liken it to, many of your audience members, I think, would appreciate this. This is sort of our era of what happened a couple centuries ago, where this great technology called electricity was being introduced into the world. The light bulb and like all these things. And people probably had all the same kind of conversations and fears, right? To go back to what you started with, as they did back then. I heard it's dangerous. I heard there's a fire. The house burnt down with that electricity stuff. You can get electrocuted. And of course, it took time, right, to get evolved into our society, for it to be accepted. And for now to be in the background where we don't think about it at all until it goes out. And all of a sudden everyone knows, hey, there's no electricity. And even in that darkness, though, we realize that these technologies that have sort of been unconditional seismic shifts in humanity that have sort of changed the way of our lives have been things that humans have adapted to all along. Now, many will say AI is a lot different in many ways, and I think that's true to some extent. But I believe that humanity will have the capacity, the ingenuity, and I hope the moral compass to use this technology in a good way.
Absolutely. And it's still a technology that can hurt or heal.
Or
And it's
heal.
up to us humans to decide which side we want to take and handle it with care and cautious. Same as the light bulb. You can get burned. You can
You can't get burned.
get burned.
All right. Handle with care. Absolutely. I like to think, like you said, using that word tool is really important. Um, you could have a hammer and you could build a doghouse, or you could build a cathedral. It all depends on how you use that tool.
Absolutely.
And I think this is our moment as a society to really think about how it is that we want to harness this technology, use it effectively. And in my mind, in healthcare, I think there's so much opportunity, so much untapped opportunity that we're going to begin to really fully appreciate, I think, in the coming years. And it's going to happen at a very rapid pace, which I will have to say, my observation is not many people are prepared for. That's just my opinion. And I think that's why the work that you're doing and elevating the conversation and heightening the awareness of this technology and its implications, not only in healthcare, but in all sectors, is really important, because it's not good to be, in an era where things are happening very rapidly and not be aware of what's happening so that you can adapt and change. Because that is what I think will bring you a lot of anxiety. That is what will bring you a lot of unease and make you feel uncomfortable. But the more you learn about it and understand and appreciate how it could potentially help you in your life, in your space, in your work, I think now it becomes something that you have agency over. And now you can say, I'm empowered now to use this tool to go build my cathedral. And now have this tool, beat me up and, put me out of a job and my livelihood and all this other stuff.
I
And to
think,
be part of the conversation, of course.
yes. And I think the critical path is to switch from concept of fear into curiosity.
Absolutely.
And that will change everything. And you're right, not everybody's ready for the transformation that comes their way. And I think it will see a lot of concerns and red flags raised by the people who are receiving the healthcare in a that they're exposed to note takers in doctor's offices and conversational AI in a patient care. A lot of people who are not as advanced educated into how AI actually works and how it integrates safely and securely inside of the enterprise or medical networks have concerns, right? What happens to my data? Who owns it? Where does it store it? What happens to my PII? Is it listening? Is it my neighbor's going to know what I tell? You wouldn't believe it. I've still had a conversation with some people believe if I put something on my chat GPT, spit out in yours. So that's not how the technology, and I think technology works. And I think that's important to really spread the awareness and educate people and help them through this shift of this transition from concern and fear into curious and openness, and take baby steps. Ask questions. Even if someone's in a patient's care and have a doctor's asking permission to take AI notes for the digitalization of the records that feeds into the network of doctors instantly and helps them to provide a better care globally from just you sharing your information that is secured and protected by HIPAA, then you're contributing to the evolution and transformation of the healthcare globally, not just for yourself. Can you tell us a little bit more in terms of your thought process? Like, what would you tell your patients who are terrified of AI or share any informations in the medical field?
That's a great question. I think my experience with engagement when it comes to AI, the topic of AI privacy, the topic of AI utility, and how it's going to impact my life from the patient's perspective has been mixed. So it's kind of like the usual distribution. There's some people that are super excited. They're like, oh my gosh, I asked a question to ChatGPT and it gave me all this information. I put in my own information and it personalized this whole thing for me. And now I understand. So you have that camp. Then you have like the other camp, which is like, I'm not using that. I heard that it's going to take my information and broadcast it out somewhere else. And I don't trust it. And it's hallucinating and it's doing all this stuff. So you have that camp. And then you have people that are sort of indifferent and in between. One of the things I love to do is ask my audiences when I speak in public to people and I say, how many people are AI optimists? And they'll be like, third of the people that raise their hand.
Raise your
How
hand.
many people are optimists? Third. How many people are pessimists? A third. And then how many people don't have an opinion? And there'll be like a number of people that put that there. And then I try to say, listen, I hope to share some information with you that if you're an optimist, I'll temper your optimism. And if you're a pessimist, I'll elevate your optimism. And if you don't have an opinion, hopefully after we talk, you'll have an opinion. So I hope for your audience, that's what's going to happen here. So for those people that are listening that are worried and scared, I would just say, listen, put things in context. Privacy is absolutely something that's important. There's no question about that. No one wants to have information about themselves revealed in such a way, especially if they don't consent to it. But it is also, in my opinion, a generational thing. I have children. I have young adults. I shouldn't even call them children anymore. But in my mind as a parent, my kids are always my babies. But I have young adults. They are sharing things on the phone all the time that I would never think of sharing. And then, dare I say, my parents, both of them have passed away right now. If they were aware of some of the things I've shared, rather through text or a pic, they would never do that. So it's a generational thing. I think that we have to have the grace and the understanding and the respect that people are not all going to appreciate this vulnerability, the sharing, this information sort of exchange the same way. That's just a given. That's just the facts of life. Now, parking that away, thinking about those that are indifferent and they're like, I'm not sure about this thing. I say to that group of people, this is our electricity moment.
Love it.
AI is the general purpose technology of our era. And a general purpose technology means that it's going to permeate everything. There's no part of your life, unless you live off the grid and you're surviving off the earth, where you don't need electricity. But if you are sort of part of society in that way, electricity is impacting your life. Going back to our colleagues that lived maybe over a century ago when this new technology of electricity was being introduced to them, there were a cadre of people, I'm sure, Eva, that said, you know what? I don't know about that electricity thing. I'm going to stick with my candles and the lit gas lamps here. That's just a fad. It's going to go away. I could tell you that group did not do very well. So for those of you that are in the middle, this is your AI electricity moment. Don't be the candle holder and the gas lamper. Use those for special nights and occasions and romantic moments, but not for your life. This is not one of those times. And for the optimist, I will say, Eva, you brought up a very important thing. Yes, there are privacy concerns. There's a great possibility that you may share something that may get exposed, and someone may capture a picture of you, and that's possible right now, right? And you'll see a video that was, how did they do that? They made a deep fake of me, and you'll get upset, and that is a possibility. That is a real possibility. So you have to understand, not only on a personal level, but also on an enterprise level, if you're leading an organization, particularly in healthcare, I would say the most important thing that you have to worry about is not, well, should I be on this AI bandwagon? What I got to do an AI project? I would be vigilantly thinking about, how do I secure my network?
Absolutely.
How do I make it possible that you don't even need a cyber attack, but you could have an AI agent come in and someone ask it questions, and all of a sudden it's pulling information from your database and all of the access of your information, and now gets transmitted to a place or a person or entity that you didn't want that to happen. You should be thinking about, how do I secure that? That should temper your optimism a little bit. Like, you worry about that. So these are the kinds of things that I think, no matter what camp you're in, these are all going to be issues that we struggle with, that we understand, appreciate, and we're going to continue to evolve in this space. And you're going to see a job kind of shift. You're going to see a professional shift. You're going to see new sectors emerge. You're going to see new professions emerge. And you're going to just see a paradigm change, I think, in many ways. Because again, going back to this general purpose technology concept, it is not possible for you to escape its impact on your life. And so if you're in the middle, like I said, don't let this be your candle gaslight moment. Kind of see the light, come into the come into the modern era. And for those that are pessimistic, I would just say, like, you just gave great advice. Be curious, experiment with it. There's really no harm in doing that. Like, just at a very minimal, just experiment with it. It's kind of like email. I'm sure there was a time when, if you look back in your mind, you're like, I don't know about this email thing. I don't trust it. It's too clunky. It's too hard. Now we can't live without it. Now we've got so much of it, we don't even want it anymore. We want to go back to like letters. So again, it's just, every technology is just kind of the way it evolves. AI, though, is a lot more powerful. I think its potential is far reaching and more impactful than perhaps some of these other things that have come along over the years. These 5 super forces are going to continue to be at play. They're going to continue to accelerate and impact our pace and rate at which AI impacts our lives and permeates our spaces. But I am one of those optimists, and I'm the optimist because I think that in healthcare, it's important. I tell my colleagues this. I want to evangelize that you all need to be a part of the conversation. This is not the time to be the ostrich and put your head in the sand and say, this is just going to fad and just go away. It's not. I think it's going to impact us in a way that, if we are not at the table making some of these, sort of informed decisions as these technologies, permeate our spaces, it's going to be something that we come to regret.
Absolutely. And last question to you. So you are a father, you have children, I have children. Your parents told you to become either a surgeon, doctor, or a lawyer. What are you telling to your kids now in an era of AI, and which options do they have? Because when I grew up, I had the same thing. I had an options to choose from, all the doctors or all the engineers option, but there was no other ways to go.
Well, that is a really good question. I'm going to confess something. You sound like we rehearsed this, but trust me, we didn't. I wanted to be an artist, and I told my wife, I said, listen, whatever our kids want to do, I'm going to support. I'm not going to suppress their inner artist. If they want to be an artist, whatever it is they want to do, I want them to be happy and enjoy and be dedicated and passionate about what they do. Because I think that's like one of the greatest fulfillments in life, is to be able to do something passionate that you're passionate about, something that you really love doing and enjoy doing. And oh, by the way, you get paid for it. Like, that's nirvana. Like, if you can get that, that's great. So I want them to be in that space. Well, it turns out, not because of anything that I've done, they both want to be lawyers. The only correlation I can think of is that their dad, me, has been on the phone talking to lawyers throughout their entire childhood. I've always had real estate attorneys, patent attorneys, friends that are attorneys. We have family members that are attorneys. So dad spends a lot of time talking to friends and they're attorneys. So maybe they're like, well, if we become attorneys, dad will talk to us a lot. But
That's what I was about to say.
I think they both gravitated to that, and I'm glad. They both like to read. I believe that they're great writers, and I think they'll both be well. Now, I will put this one caveat in. This could have been one of the influences. Yeah, my son in particular, who's older than my daughter, at a very young age, he would be very argumentative. They're not too far in sort of in distance in time. They're like 18 months apart. And of course, for all the fathers out there, and maybe you could appreciate this being a daughter, I treat my daughter differently than I treat my son. There's just no way around that, you know. She could do something and I'd be like, oh, he does something and I'm like, so he would always tell me, it's not fair. There's no justice. He
Here
would
you
just
go, right? They're gonna
he would
claim
just,
their
he would
justice
just
now.
get this like sense of like this is just in this is not fair. And I would tell him, there is a profession where you can get paid a lot of money for arguing, and maybe you should think about that. And I think maybe that seed was planted at an early age, and because my daughter looks up to her big brother, maybe that's why she wants to do that. But they also argue a lot between each other, and they certainly did that when they were younger. And I think maybe this idea that I may have planted and said, there's a lot of money to be made for arguing. You guys try to harness that energy, and maybe you can make it very impactful. But I think at the end of the day, that they have found something that they have come to appreciate can be impactful, to society. The law and justice, and thinking about how you can use the law as an instrument to help people, I think is their way of perhaps fulfilling their potential and sort of their destiny and legacy. So I'm all for it and support them 100%. And if they change their mind, I'll be there to support them as well.
To become doctors, right?
Yeah.
Hassan, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and insightful thoughts. Again, we'll share the information how to reach and connect with you on the bottom of this video descriptions or on a podcast notes. We'll share the link to the book. I'm sure the audience would love to learn more about you and your journey. And I know it's not only one, so I'll let the audience to decide which one is their favorite. And again, thank you so much for your time, and hopefully to catch up with you sometimes later.
Thank you, Eva. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Very honored to be a part of your community and to be invited as a guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.